Hello and welcome to Dining with Death, where we discuss infamous cases of death and murder that have an element of food to them, and then I cook or sample the food from the case. I'm Stacy Lee. Let's begin. If there's one thing I've learned as a true crime fan and now someone who covers true crime cases, it's that you should never, ever judge a book by its cover. Some of the most vicious people on earth are charming, good-looking, and well-dressed. Some of the most manipulative and evil people have a beautiful smile, and maybe one of the scarier facts is that sometimes the sweet little elderly couple down the street, the one that you feel a little sorry for when you see them struggling with ailments and age, sometimes they're the most dangerous predators of all. This is Ray and Faye Copeland, and they are the oldest couple ever to be sentenced to death in the United States. These two people did things that are so evil, it's kind of tough to wrap your mind around the behavior. Ray Copeland was born in Oklahoma in 1914, and his family struggled terribly during the Great Depression. He was stealing and forging checks and doing whatever he had to do to get by before he was even a teenager. He ended up spending a year in prison, and after he was released in 1940, he met Faye Wilson, and the two were married soon after their meeting. While researching this case, I learned that Ray Copeland was illiterate. He couldn't read or write, but somehow he managed to learn math, and he also managed to learn how to fill out a blank check. Faye became pregnant quite soon after the marriage, and after their first child was born, she was quickly pregnant again. Ray supported the family with all kinds of criminal acts and cons, and because of this, the family was always on the move. Ray always had people after him, and this forced the family to live a somewhat transient lifestyle. He was jailed several times in the 1940s and 1950s, and the story goes that one day, as he was sitting in jail, he came up with a plan, a better criminal plan, one that would make him more money than he had been making with less risk of getting caught. Back in the 40s and 50s, a lot of business was conducted on the honor code, but banks also had lists of people they wouldn't lend money to, they wouldn't do business with. There has always been some type of credit scoring system, even though the credit reporting system we use today didn't go into effect until 1989. Well, Ray was on just about every list in the South. No one would do business with him. He was blacklisted from buying and selling cattle, and back then, for a farmer, that was a very big deal. Most people owned a few cows in that part of the world, and Ray couldn't even get a few, let alone a whole herd. The story continues that as Ray sat in jail that day, stewing about the fact that he was forced to commit petty crimes in order to support his family, because apparently getting a job just was not in the cards, Ray Copeland came up with a plan. He might be blacklisted and unable to buy cattle, but what if he were to get other people to buy and sell the cattle for him? The last time Ray was released from prison, he told Faye that he was going to hire a farmhand. Faye was surprised to hear this. The family was barely getting by on their own and didn't have the money to pay a farmhand, but Ray went into town and soon came back with a drifter. At this point in time, the couple was living on a farm in Mooresville, Missouri. The first farmhand had been on the property for about a week when Ray approached him with a plan. Ray told this man, who had been a hobo before he met Ray, that the two of them were going to go to the cattle auction. Ray gave this drifter a blank check. The drifter signed it at the auction using his name to buy cattle and, of course, his face. Nobody knew him. The drifter took his purchased cattle back to the farm. They loaded them up on Ray's trailer and off they went. The next morning, Ray had sold the cattle off. He didn't waste any time. When the check bounced, the auction representatives came looking for the man who had written the bad checks, but he was nowhere to be found. This scheme worked so well that Ray worked it again and again and again. After the third or fourth time, the police were on to what Ray was doing, and he was arrested and thrown in jail. There didn't seem to be much concern about the missing drifters. They were homeless men, after all, and Ray claimed he didn't know what had happened to them. In fact, he even claimed they'd tried to swindle him too. But the local cops weren't really buying it. Things must have been a lot easier for con men back in the day because there was no way to track people. You could go into a town, use a fake name, con everybody, do what you were going to do, pick up and leave, and there really was nowhere to find out who you really were. The cops caught up with Ray this time, and he spent a short time in the county jail. When he got out, he picked up right where he had left off, but this time he made sure that the drifters he picked up couldn't be tied to him in any way. No one is sure just how many hobos Ray Copeland picked up over the next 2 decades. They do know that he seemed to be doing well, better than before at least. Now, I'm assuming that everyone in the areas where Ray would settle knew that he was blacklisted from buying cattle. Maybe it wasn't common knowledge, but it would have definitely been knowledge in the banks and at the cattle auctions. Now, as you drive by his farm, it's easy to see he has cattle there. I couldn't find an explanation as to how Ray explained that away, how he told people he had cattle when everybody knew he wasn't allowed to purchase cattle. It's just one of those details that might be lost to time. Everything was going quite well for Ray and Faye Copeland. Their bills were paid for the first time in a long time. Faye was able to quit her jobs waitressing and working as a maid because the farm was doing better than it had before. Their kids grew up and moved away, but then in 1989, with Ray and Faye well into their 70s, this man named Jack McCormick called the Crime Stoppers hotline with an incredible story. Jack McCormick claimed that Ray Copeland had picked him up to work on his farm, and while he was there, he had seen human bones on the farm. Lots of human bones. As if that claim weren't shocking enough, Jack McCormick then told the Crime Stoppers representative that Ray Copeland had tried to kill him. Ray had taken Jack into a barn on his property, telling him that they had to shoot a raccoon that was eating the horse feed. When the two men got into the barn, Ray picked up the gun and pointed it at Jack. Jack McCormick looked at Ray, and for some reason, Ray hesitated. Jack then began talking a mile a minute. He told Ray he would disappear forever. Ray would never hear from him again. He told Ray he'd leave all of his belongings and take off, and that would be the end of it. For whatever reason, Ray Copeland let Jack McCormick go. For 5 months, Jack McCormick kept his secrets, but then he decided it was time to talk. He was feeling guilty, and that's why he decided to contact the authorities. Crime Stoppers contacted the police, and although at first the cops were quite skeptical of this wild story, they felt it was worth investigating. The first thing they did was pull Ray Copeland's criminal record. What they saw, they realized that for the last 2 decades, this little old man farmer living in their area was actually a very dangerous criminal with a long rap sheet. Using Ray's criminal record as evidence, the police obtained a search warrant. They arrived at the Copeland farm with dozens of officers and a team of bloodhounds. For the first couple of hours, the search went slowly. Despite having police crawling all over the farm, with dogs to boot, they didn't find anything. But then, in the 3rd hour, they came to a barn on the corner of the property. There, they found the bodies of 3 young men buried in shallow graves on the barn floor. Here you can see them uncovering the badly decomposed bodies of the unfortunate men Ray Copeland had picked up. There is something especially sinister to me about people who prey on people in need. All murder is awful, all predatory behavior is disgusting, but when you come onto somebody that's willing to work to support themselves, that's in a bad place, and then you prey on them, I think that's just especially sinister, right? The cops began to dig, and the forensics unit was called in. Before long, they found another body, and then another. 5 bodies were laying in the barn. Each of the men had been shot in the head with the same weapon, a .22 caliber Marlin rifle that was found inside the Copeland home. Then police found the piles of bones. Some were scattered on the property, and some were in the corner of a second nearby barn. The forensics team began to try and put the skeletons together, but some of the bones were missing. Police were never able to get a full, correct body count. There are 5 known victims and bones that document around 12 victims. The authorities then put together a photo lineup of the men they believed to be missing. As you can see here, they thought these 8 men might be some of the victims on the Copeland property. They brought in a forensic dentist who began examining the skulls. He quickly ran into a problem. Because these men were drifters, no one knew where they were from, and being drifters, they hadn't had any recent dental work. However, some progress was made, and they were able to begin identifying some of the men. Word spread throughout the area and then across the country. This little elderly couple was taking in drifters, using their anonymity to purchase cattle, and then murdering them in cold blood. It was shocking. Questions began to be asked. Just how involved was Faye Copeland? It was known in the area that Ray beat on Faye. After Ray and Faye were both arrested, Faye's defense began to use what amounts to a battered wife defense, saying she was basically forced to do what her violent and dangerous husband wanted her to do. Faye's children didn't believe she was involved at all. But as the trial continued, it became clear Faye had plenty of opportunities to alert authorities as to what was happening, to get help, to stop what her husband was doing, and she never took any action at all. Her fate was really sealed when authorities found a list written in Faye's handwriting of the men's names. Next to each of the men they had been able to identify was an X. Faye knew those men were dead. That was enough for the jury to believe that Faye Copeland knew exactly what her husband was doing, what he had been doing, despite her claims that she was shocked to find out he had been murdering people. The jury convicted Faye Copeland on 5 counts of first-degree murder and sentenced her to death. Ray Copeland went on trial in March of 1991. He too was convicted of 5 counts of murder, and he too was sentenced to death. When he was told that his wife had been sentenced to die by lethal injection, he coldly said, "Well, those things happen to some, you know." Ray died of natural causes just 2 years after his trial. Faye's death sentence was overturned in 1999, and she was resentenced to life without parole. Faye had a stroke in 2002 and was given medical parole. She died in a nursing home in Missouri at the age of 82 later that year. Ray and Faye Copeland leave behind 5 children and 17 grandchildren. The Copeland family has to live with the knowledge that their family patriarch was a serial killer, preying upon innocent men looking for work. I wish them well, and I hope they are healing from this as best they can. Well, Ray and Faye Copeland were in the cattle business. So stay with me now. We've got a little guest chef coming your way, and we are going to cook the king of all beef cuts, prime rib, the proper way, as we go dining with death. Here's our guest chef for today, my husband Jason, who is the meat guy. He does the beef, he does the chicken, he does the pork, he does the fish. He is the meat guy. Look at this beautiful piece of prime rib that we've got here today. We leave the fat on and we are going to season this thing beautifully. You want to let it rest and come to room temperature before you start working with it. Put it on a rack over a pan like this so it can catch any blood or drippings as it comes to room temp. You're going to take some really good olive oil and spread that all over this beautiful cut of meat. It's going to act as the binding agent for all of our seasonings. Make sure you do it on all sides. Make sure you get it all over everywhere. You need some fresh rosemary. I would say you're going to need about a half a cup when it's all cleaned and minced. Don't be afraid of fresh herbs. Just pull everything off of the stems and give it a rough chop. For this recipe, it doesn't need to be neat. It doesn't need to be pretty. We are just getting those herbs on the outside to form a crust and to season what will become our au jus. So just a rough chop like this. Like I say, nothing fancy. Get a nice heavy bottom roasting pan. Put your wire rack and your prime rib over that roasting pan and season. This is a restaurant season. This is a chef's season. You are forming a crust of seasoning on the outside of this piece of meat. This isn't a little sprinkle of salt. Season this baby. Lots of fresh cracked pepper too. Oh, I love fresh cracked pepper so much. All sides, guys, all sides. Everybody gets seasoned. And do it over the pan, because any seasonings that don't get on the meat will go down underneath into that roasting pan and help to season the au jus that we'll be making here in a bit. Again, a heavy season. This is a heavy crust of salt and pepper. You need this. The beef needs this. This is how you get that good steakhouse restaurant quality flavor that a lot of people cannot seem to get at home. You just don't realize how much seasoning is necessary. Here goes the rosemary. Again, you're going to form a nice crust with that rosemary. Pat it in there, all sides of that meat. And don't forget the bottom. Those bones will create the most delicious drippings, so you want them to be nice and seasoned. Isn't that beautiful? And then look, you've caught all the extra seasonings in the pan, so nothing goes to waste. We don't waste anything. Put that in a 500-degree oven, a very, very hot oven, for 15 minutes. You're doing a sear, an initial sear, very, very hot oven. After 15 minutes, you're going to turn the temperature down to 325. These are Fahrenheit temperatures, and you're going to go for about 90 minutes on that 325. Okay, let's pull this out. Look at the pan drippings. Oh my gosh, the smell, you guys, the smell. Use a thermometer. I'm always surprised at how many people do not have a thermometer. We're a little bit shy here. We need a few more minutes. We're trying to get to about 125. So we're going to go another 25 minutes and test it again. That red thermometer's a little pricey, but these are the thermometers that I gave to my sous chefs in our restaurant, and they're like 10 bucks. Go to the restaurant supply and buy one of these for 10 bucks. They're fantastic. I've had these for 10 years. They still work. We are going to remove that, use a hot towel, and place that over the pan it was in initially to bring to room temp. Of course, you've washed that at this point, and now we're going to work with these drippings. Ooh, look at those. Okay, that's a little too much oil for what we need. So you're going to pour that hot grease off. You can use this for so many things. Baste some meat with it. Oh, it would just be fantastic. Put your roasting pan over the fire and leave just a skim of oil on the bottom. You're going to add about a cup of red wine. These measurements are all going to be measure with your heart type measurements. And then you're going to bring that up to a boil, scraping the brown bits off the bottom of the pan. Those brown bits are called fond, and that's where all the flavoring is. You want to use all of those little bits in your sauce. So delicious. Okay, you're going to add a couple of dashes of Worcestershire sauce. Again, incorporate that really, really well and let it begin to reduce. Pour in about 2.5 cups of good beef stock, really good quality beef stock. And again, incorporate that well and let it continue to come to a simmer. Jason always adds a little water to his au jus. You need it to cut through some of the saltiness and just to make a little bit more. We like this better than bouillon paste. It's much better than bouillon cubes. Add about a tablespoon to that. Let it melt in with those drippings and the wine. Oh my goodness, the smell is incredible. Okay, you've got some more fresh rosemary and some fresh thyme. Just throw that in there. This is all going to get strained. Super easy. Toss it in and let those fresh herbs bring a nice earthy bite to this rich, luxurious au jus. Of course, you need fresh cracked pepper with absolutely everything. Now, this is a very old school prime rib trick. You take the zest of an orange and throw that in with your au jus. You don't want any of the white part, the pith. You just want the zest, the very top layer of that bright, delicious orange. The citrus goes so well with the richness of the beef and the saltiness of all of the seasonings that are in there. It's just fantastic. And of course, we don't waste anything. Then take the orange and use all the juice of that orange in the au jus. Doesn't this look fantastic? And the smell, oh, I wish you could smell it. Of course, we taste as we go. Even when you have a recipe, you should taste as you go. Make it to your liking. You're the one who's eating it, right? Look at this baby. It has rested for a good 15 minutes. It is a perfect medium rare, absolutely beautiful and ready to plate. We are going to take this delicious au jus and strain it. Pull out the herbs, run it through a fine mesh sieve, and we are ready to try this. We've got some creamy horseradish, our delicious au jus for dipping, and a fat slab of prime rib. Does not this look incredible? Ooh, it just cuts like butter. It's so good. You need a little horseradish. Give it a dip in that luxurious sauce, and it is just, my mouth is watering doing the voiceover. Now I want prime rib. Isn't this fantastic? Just a beautiful classic dinner of the king of beef, prime rib, and that sauce is just to die for. Thank you so much for joining us, you guys. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. Thank you, Chef Jason, for guest starring, and I will see you next time on Dining with Death. Bye.